Karen didn't wait for a response. She strutted down the porch steps like she owned the place and paced on the front lawn, phone still to her ear, as she delivered exaggerated descriptions of an unauthorized squatter and a potentially dangerous situation involving a minor. Inside, Noah moved like a shadow between windows, carefully peeking through the curtains. He didn't know what exactly Karen was saying, but her tone chilled him. He crouched behind the couch, still holding the phone to his ear. The dispatcher's voice stayed steady. "Noah, you did the right thing. Officers are 2 minutes away. Stay where you are. Keep your phone with you. Do you feel safe right now?" "I think so," Noah said. "But she's still outside." "She just told the police my dad isn't the owner." "Okay," the dispatcher said. "Just stay on the line. Can you tell me your dad's full name again?" "James Carter. He's a doctor. He works at the emergency room down on Woodbury." There was a pause. Then, in a tone that made Noah feel slightly safer, the dispatcher replied, "Got it. Property records confirm ownership. Officers will speak to her. You don't need to open the door for anyone until they arrive." Noah stayed low, listening as Karen's voice rose again outside. She was now talking to someone else, a neighbor. Another HOA member. Through the window, Noah saw a man in a sweatshirt standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. "You saw that, right?" Karen said to the man, "I used the master key. This door has been tampered with. That's an HOA violation and possibly criminal mischief." The man didn't respond. He just shook his head and walked away, muttering something Karen clearly didn't like. She scoffed and turned her back to him. Noah bit his lip. The seconds felt like hours, and then sirens. Karen's head snapped toward the sound, and Noah peered out just enough to see 2 police cruisers pulling up along the curb. Blue and red lights flashed across the street. So the moment of truth had arrived. Karen marched toward the first car as if she were welcoming guests to a dinner party. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I've been trying to deal with this myself. But frankly, I was left no choice but to involve the authorities." The taller officer stepped out, eyes scanning the house as he listened. Karen didn't stop talking. "There's someone inside that house. He's been avoiding HOA compliance for weeks. The smart lock didn't respond to the universal override, which suggests tampering, and the resident minor refused to open the door or identify himself." The second officer walked toward the house, hand resting near his belt. Karen followed, still explaining how she was just doing her job. How this was all a big misunderstanding that wouldn't have happened if people simply followed the rules. Noah, still on the line, whispered, "They're here." "Good," the dispatcher said. "Keep calm. I'll stay on the call until they speak to you." The knock on the door was firm, but not forceful. Then the taller officer spoke through the door, calm and measured. "Hello, says Officer Ramirez with the county. Police? Is Noah Carter inside?" Noah stood, heart pounding. "Yes," he called back. "It's okay," the officer said. "You're safe. We know you're the homeowner's son. Do you mind unlocking the door so we can speak?" Noah hesitated, but the dispatcher gave him a gentle nod through the phone. "You can open it now." "Noah, they're on your side." He reached for the deadbolt with shaking fingers as the door creaked open. Karen stepped forward triumphantly, only to stop dead in her tracks when she saw the officer hold his hand up to block her. "Ma'am, we need to speak with the resident. Please step back." "What?" "But I called you, and we received a second call from the child inside this home," Officer Ramirez said evenly. "We also confirmed ownership. This is Dr. James Carter's residence." Karen blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. For the first time that morning, she looked confused. Officer Ramirez stepped inside, gently guiding Noah to the couch outside. Karen stood frozen on the porch, still clutching the phone to her ear, like it could save her from what was coming next. Karen stood on the porch, arms folded so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her carefully rehearsed narrative about a squatter, an HOA violation, a dangerous situation was unraveling before Her eyes inside the house, Officer Ramirez crouched beside Noah on the couch, speaking in a soft, reassuring tone. The other officer, a woman named Dawson, walked through the foyer slowly, eyes scanning the walls, noting the family photos, James in hospital scrubs, Noah with a science fair medal, a framed certificate with James's name on the deed. None of this matched the story Karen had spun outside. Noah, Ramirez said gently, can you tell me exactly what happened before we got here? Noah nodded. She's been coming here since we moved in. My dad told her we're not in the HOA, but she said we were anyway. Today she tried to open the door with a key. I got scared and called 911. Officer Dawson stepped into the room. The key didn't work, she confirmed, holding up a scratched, long-handled metal key inside an evidence bag. We found this lying by the mat. Noah looked at it, then at the officers. That's not our key. My dad changed all the locks when we moved in. Ramirez stood up. Thank you, Noah. You did the right thing. Outside, Karen was growing restless. She tried peeking through the front window, but Dawson stepped in front of the glass with deliberate calm. Moments later, Ramirez opened the front door and stepped outside. Well, Karen asked, trying to sound composed, though her voice wavered. The boy inside is the legal resident's son. We verified the property title. There's no squatter, no forced entry. No cause for alarm, except perhaps the fact that you attempted to enter a private residence without consent. Karen blinked. I had the HOA master key. That key, Ramirez said, should never have been used on a property outside the HOA boundary, especially when you were already told by the homeowner not to come back. Karen's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. But it's not outside the HOA. It's part of the historical zone. There was a grandfather clause. It's a map. We reviewed the map with dispatch while en route. This home opted out 10 years ago. The boundary line was redrawn. It's not HOA territory anymore. No, that's not. Ramirez's voice dropped an octave. Ma'am, did you have permission to use that key on this door? Karen hesitated, but her pride wouldn't allow her to back down. HOA president, I don't need permission to ensure neighborhood compliance. It's about safety, officer. Dawson stepped outside, arms crossed. That child was alone and terrified. You tried to unlock the door, then accused him of squatting. You escalated a situation that didn't exist. Karen stiffened. So what now? You're going to arrest me for enforcing the rules? Ramirez exchanged a glance with Dawson. No one's being arrested, but a report will be filed. We've already taken the key as evidence. The homeowner will be notified of his rights to pursue legal action if he chooses. Karen scoffed, turning away. This is ridiculous. I've served this community for 12 years. I have the authority to act. Not on private property, you don't, Dawson said. Not here. As the officer stepped back inside, Karen stood alone on the porch, her authority stripped bare. For the first time, her title didn't shield her. The world wasn't bending to her anymore. And when James returned home to learn what had happened to his son while he was away, Karen would soon realize she hadn't just misjudged boundaries, she had crossed one that couldn't be undone. James Carter turned into his driveway just after 6 p.m., exhausted from back-to-back shifts, his ID badge still clipped to his scrubs. But the second he saw the police cruiser idling near his curb, fatigue evaporated. He threw the car in park and rushed to the door, heart pounding. Before he could knock, it opened. Noah stood there, pale but safe. Dad, Noah whispered. She tried to come in. James dropped to his knees and hugged him tightly. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? But she used a key, tried to unlock the door. James looked over Noah's shoulder and saw Officers Ramirez and Dawson standing in the foyer. Karen's name was already on his tongue like a bitter taste. Karen did this. Officer Ramirez nodded. Your son acted responsibly. He called 911 immediately. Ms. Delaney attempted to enter the home using a key that didn't work. She also made a false report claiming someone was squatting on the property. James stood, jaw tight. I've told that woman 3 times. We're not part of the HOA. My father opted out years ago. We confirmed that, Dawson said. Your deed is clean. No HOA encumbrance. She had no right to access your property. James looked outside. Karen was still loitering on the sidewalk, arms crossed, fuming like she was the victim. He shook his head. She tried this while I was at work. It's with my kid alone in the house. Ramirez handed James a slip of paper. We've documented everything, and we're recommending a restraining order if she attempts this again. You also have the right to file a civil harassment case. James took the paper, glancing down at it. His fingers tightened. Be doing that first thing Monday? Dawson added. We also seized the key she used. We'd like to know how she got it. She's obsessed with those locks, James muttered. Tried to tell me I needed the community-issued ones. I changed all of them the week we moved in. She clearly wasn't happy about it. When the officers left, Karen lingered across the street, watching. James didn't look at her as he closed the door. He turned to Noah. You okay? Noah nodded slowly. I think so. But Dad, she was so sure she had power, she said she'd call the police and have me removed. She thought her key meant she could do anything. James placed a hand on his son's shoulder. She's wrong. She's always been wrong. And now there's a record to prove it. That night, James installed an extra camera over the porch and another by the side gate. He walked the perimeter twice, making sure everything was locked tight. Karen may have tried to wield control with keys and titles. But she'd forgotten the most important part of the game. He owned the board now. Across the street, Karen's living room lights were on. The curtains twitched once as if someone was peeking. James didn't bother looking back. In her mind, she still believed this was her neighborhood, her domain. But the key hadn't worked. The lies hadn't held up. And next time, the consequences wouldn't just be a warning from the police. What she didn't realize yet was that her carefully curated power was starting to crack. And James was ready to hammer at the fault lines. Because this wasn't just about a lock dot. It was about control. And Karen had just lost it. 2 days of silence passed. James had almost convinced himself Karen had finally learned her lesson. The extra cameras were up and working. Noah had returned to his usual routine. And the neighborhood felt still again. But peace in Woodcrest Hills rarely lasted. It began with a notice. Not a letter in the mailbox, but duct taped to James's front door in the early morning hours. Big bold print, formatted like an official citation, claiming he was in violation of unauthorized occupancy and demanding he attend an emergency compliance hearing. No signature, no date. No legal. Stamp. James tore it down and tossed it in the trash. But later that day, 3 more neighbors received flyers slipped under their doors, anonymous accusations that certain residents were endangering the safety and uniformity of the community. One of them, a kind widow named Mrs. Helprin, stopped James on the sidewalk. I don't know what's going on, she said, voice trembling. But Karen's been talking to people telling them you faked your deed. James nearly laughed. Faked it. It's on public record. She's saying your father never opted out of the HOA. That your ownership isn't valid and that you're just squatting in that house. James blinked. What? She's showing people a map. An old one. Karen wasn't retreating. She was going nuclear. That evening. James reviewed his deed again. He had every document in order, notarized, confirmed by the county, and even cross-checked by his lawyer. Still, it didn't stop the whispers. Noah returned home from school. That day, unusually quiet. When James asked what was wrong, the boy hesitated before saying, some kids said their parents were told we're being evicted. James looked up sharply. Who told them that? Karen. She was outside the school when I was getting picked up. James's blood simmered. The next morning, before the sun rose, James drove to City Hall. The clerk confirmed what he already knew: his property was fully autonomous. Outside the HOA's reach, But she added something strange, actually, the clerk said, scrolling through the digital archive. Someone requested a boundary review for your street last week. James leaned forward. Who? The clerk's screen flicked once, then froze. Karen Delaney. She was trying to redraw the lines. When he returned home, another surprise was waiting. A certified envelope in his mailbox. Inside, stapled to a cover letter from the HOA. This was a formal notice of dispute claiming James's residency had been flagged for violation. And demanding mediation. James took it straight to the police station. You told me she couldn't act like this, he said to Officer Dawson, who met him in the lobby. She can't, Dawson replied. But that doesn't mean she won't try to fake authority. She's harassing my kid. She's spreading lies to my neighbors. Now she's filing fake paperwork to force us into HOA mediation. Dawson took the envelope, flipping through. The pages will log this into your harassment case. You said you have cameras, front and back. Good. Don't delete anything. If she steps foot on your property again, we'll escalate it to trespassing with prior intent. She's trying to pressure you into submission, but we've seen her kind before. James left the station feeling like a fuse had been lit. The paperwork. The rumors, the fake notices, it wasn't just intimidation. It was escalation. Karen was playing a long game, but James was done playing. What she didn't know was that someone else had been watching her too. And very soon, the cracks in her kingdom would be exposed for everyone to see. On Thursday morning, an email popped into James's inbox. No subject line, no signature. It's just a PDF attachment labeled HOA Internal Confidential Suspicious. He scanned the file on his work laptop using 3 antivirus tools before opening. What he found nearly made him spill his coffee. The document was a scanned internal HOA Memo 1 official letterhead outlining a proposed boundary annexation. The top line read, Goal, reabsorb outlying properties for compliance oversight. And right underneath that was a list of target addresses. James's home was first. Attached to the document was a short, typed message, she's breaking rules to expand her power. Thought you should know. You didn't hear it from me, a friend in the James leaned back in his chair, adrenaline buzzing in his fingertips. Karen wasn't just spreading rumors, she was actively plotting to absorb his land back into AGO. Jurisdiction. That explained the map Mrs. Halpern mentioned. That explained the hearing notice. This wasn't incompetence. It was a strategic move. A hostile takeover. He printed the document and took it straight to his lawyer. Within an hour, James had a cease and desist letter drafted and delivered to both the HOA board and Karen personally. But the real problem wasn't the letter. It was who the mole was. That night, James walked the neighborhood with Noah. The air was cooler, quieter, too quiet. They passed the same trimmed hedges, pristine driveways, and mailbox posts painted in HOA regulation white. Karen's porch light flickered like a warning beacon in the distance. Noah asked, Dad, why would she care so much about our house? James hesitated before answering, 'cause she can't stand not having control. And our house is a reminder that she doesn't own everything. As they turned the corner, a figure stepped out from behind a garden fence. It was a young man in his mid-20s, tall and awkward, with HOA volunteer credentials clipped to a lanyard around his neck. Hey, he whispered. Mr. Carter? James glanced down at Noah, who instinctively moved closer. I sent the email, the man said quickly. I'm not supposed to talk to you, but I couldn't take it anymore. Karen's been cooking this plan up for weeks. Wants your house, wants it under her rule. She said your non-compliance makes the neighborhood look soft. James narrowed his eyes. Why tell me this now? The man swallowed hard. Because she's rewriting records. Saw her scanning old paper maps into our system, then resaving them with new boundary lines. She's submitting them to the city as corrections. If the council doesn't check them closely, they'll accept the changes. She's forging municipal documents. James asked, stunned. She's not calling it that. She's calling it restoration of HOA integrity. But if she gets those maps passed, she can drag you into hearings, fines, even liens. James exhaled slowly. You're willing to testify. The man shook his head. Not yet. But I'll keep sending you what I can. Just be careful. She's paranoid lately. She thinks someone's leaking info, and if she figures out it's me, I understand, James said. Thank you. The man nodded once and melted back into the shadows. Later that night, James reviewed the footage from the porch cameras. At exactly 3:43 a.m., a hooded figure stepped onto his lawn. She didn't go to the door. Instead, she walked along the side of the house, paused at the window, and stared inside for 20 full seconds. Karen, she didn't knock. Didn't speak, she just watched. And in that moment, James knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. James didn't sleep that night. Not after watching Karen stare into his window like a predator staking a claim. The image played over and over in his head. It's her stillness, her silence. It's the boldness of it. At 6 a.m. sharp, he uploaded the footage to a secure drive. Then he composed a message and hit send. By 6:15, every single homeowner in Woodcrest Hills had received an email. Subject line, the truth about Karen Delaney. The email wasn't dramatic. It was clinical, composed, irrefutable. It included screenshots of the HOA memo showing the targeted annexation of James's property, legal proof of his exclusion from the HOA since 2012, a copy of the cease and desist letter, footage stills of Karen on his property at 3:43 a.m., and finally, a time-stamped video of Noah's 911 call the day Karen tried to enter with the master key. No commentary. No insults. Just facts. By 8 a.m. James's phone was buzzing with texts and missed calls. Mrs. Halpern, I had no idea it had gone this far. I'm so sorry. Tom at number 14, she told me you were hostile. She said your kid wasn't safe alone. Can't believe. She lied to us like that. Evelyn from the HOA book club. I'm forwarding this to the rest of the board. Enough is enough. By noon, the email had gone viral in the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone even made a new thread titled Karen has officially lost it. Comments flooded in. She forged a map. This is illegal. I used to defend her. Never again. James should sue. Karen didn't post a single word, but she didn't stay silent for long. That evening, James heard a knock at his door. He opened it slowly. Karen stood on the porch, arms at her sides, wearing a pristine white blouse like she was going to Sunday brunch instead of confronting the man she'd tried to destroy. You've made a grave mistake, she said, her voice sharp and trembling. You've humiliated me. Spread slander? No, James said calmly. I shared the truth. It's a difference. You think this is over. I am still the president of the HOA. I have the right to file a grievance. You're not my HOA president, Karen. You're just my neighbor. And after last night's trespass, you're very lucky I didn't press charges today. Karen's face twitched, caught between outrage and panic. You don't understand how much work I've put into this community. I understand perfectly, James replied. You built a throne out of fear and bureaucracy. But now people see what's behind it. Her voice lowered to a growl. I built this neighborhood. You poisoned it, he said, and closed the door. Inside. Noah watched from the stairs. Wide-eyed, is she going to come back? He asked. James sighed. If she does, she won't have much power left to stand on. That night, the HOA board called an emergency meeting without Karen, the anonymous volunteer, the one who leaked the documents. Sent James a screenshot of the internal vote. Motion to suspend Karen Delaney pending full investigation passed. 6-0. James stared at the screen. Not victory. Not yet. But justice was finally in motion. And Karen. She was finally beginning to understand that her keys real, or symbolic, no longer unlocked anything. Tomorrow, the board would make their decision. Public. And for the first time, Karen wouldn't be able to rewrite the rules. The official announcement came at noon. Karen Delaney suspended as HOA president, pending investigation into misconduct, boundary tampering, and abuse of authority. The neighborhood buzzed. Lawn chairs were dragged onto porches. Phones rang nonstop. Some people celebrated, others expressed cautious relief. A few, loyal to Karen to the bitter end, called it a witch hunt. But Karen herself? Silent. Until dusk. James and Noah were having dinner burgers on the back patio, trying to reclaim a sliver of normal when the silence shattered. It wasn't a knock. It was the roar of a leaf blower, but not on a lawn, not in a driveway. It was inside their backyard. James shot up, startled. He rushed around the corner of the house, and there she was, Karen, inside his fenced backyard, with a gas-powered leaf blower strapped to her chest like armor, blasting air directly at his garden beds. "Get off my property!" James shouted. She turned slowly, her hair wild, her blouse streaked with dirt. "This area is non-compliant. You're a fire risk. Look at all this debris. If the HOA won't do their duty, I will." James stared in disbelief. "You climbed my lock gate too. Blow leaves. You were warned." She shrieked over the roar of the engine. "You were told to maintain a clear buffer zone around your structure. This isn't a fire zone. It's not even HOA regulated, wrong?" she screamed, voice cracking. "That vote doesn't count. It's illegitimate." Noah stood frozen behind the glass patio door, eyes wide. James stepped forward slowly, fists clenched. "You've crossed every line. I have you on camera again. This is trespassing, vandalism, harassment, and a violation of the restraining order I filed yesterday." She froze for just a moment. "You wouldn't." "I already did." Suddenly, the gate rattled. Two uniformed officers appeared in the opening, having entered through the side alley. Karen Delaney, one of them, shouted, "Put down the blower. Hands, where we can see them." She dropped the machine and stepped back like a cornered animal. "You don't understand. Restoring order. He's poisoning this community. You need to stop talking." The officer interrupted, "Right now." James watched as she was cuffed. Her eyes, wild and bewildered, locked with his one final time. "They'll come crawling back," she hissed. One man filmed the arrest on his phone. Another clapped slowly, and inside Noah finally smiled. Karen was escorted to the cruiser without another word. Her legacy, once built on fear and control, collapsed into the gravel beneath her heels. Later that night, James uploaded the footage. Not to social media this time, it went straight to his lawyer. With her on camera, trespassing and destruction, the case against her was stronger than ever. A restraining order would turn permanent. Any future HOA attempts to interfere would be met with swift legal backlash. And for the first time since they moved in, James felt like they could breathe. Across the street, Karen's house sat dark and silent, but something still nagged at him. A feeling. He reviewed the security footage again. The camera had caught her climbing the fence, but also showed her glancing at her phone just before entering the yard. Almost like she was waiting for something. Or someone, James rewound. Zoomed in. There was a car idling at the curb. Unfamiliar. He didn't know it yet, but Karen hadn't been working alone. And this war? It had one more chapter left. James couldn't sleep. Something about the car in the footage kept digging into his thoughts. It wasn't just the oddity of it being there, was how quickly it drove off the moment Karen was arrested. He ran. The plate threw a contact at the DMV. The results shocked him. Registered to Walter Delaney, Karen's ex-husband. According to neighborhood gossip, he had moved out of state after their divorce years ago. Quiet, bookish, and invisible. Everyone assumed he'd left to get away from Karen's obsessive need for control, but He was back and watching. James met with Officer Dawson again the next morning. "She's not alone in this," James said. "Her ex was sitting at the curb, watching it all." "Why?" Dawson nodded slowly. "Interesting." Karen's phone showed recent calls to a number registered in his name. She even transferred a payment 2 days before the leaf blower stunt. "We assumed it was some personal issue." "You think he's helping her?" "I think he's helping himself." Dawson leaned forward. "Go on." "Karen never cared about my house just because it was outside the HOA. She wanted it for a reason. Something buried under all this madness. Buried under old survey documents. Property includes right of access and subterranean easement to adjoining Lot 8. And something under her property, possibly a shared basement or conduit, had once belonged to James's family. Something valuable. He remembered the strange concrete hatch in his basement storage room. His dad had always kept it locked, with a padlock he never opened. Inside was a narrow tunnel, reinforced with stone and wood leading into darkness. Curious stood nearby. "Dad, is this a secret passage?" He turned on a flashlight and crawled forward. The tunnel wasn't long, maybe 30 feet. At the end was another hatch, older and rusted. He forced it open and found himself in the crawl space beneath. Karen's garage. Old crates lined the space, labeled in faded handwriting. He opened one, blueprints, property plats, and 3 others that had once belonged to the same developer, James's grandfather. A family estate. James laughed under his breath. Karen hadn't been fighting for HOA order. She'd been trying to reclaim the estate she believed should have been hers. A soft noise from above made James freeze footsteps. Someone was in the garage. He slowly backed out through the tunnel and sealed the hatch. Once back in his own basement, he immediately called Dawson. 10 minutes later, officers arrived and secured Karen's property with a warrant based on James's easement rights and suspicion of concealed property. The crates were seized as evidence. It turned out Karen had discovered the hatch years ago and had been using it to access old documents she hoped to manipulate. Her ex-husband had helped her scan and alter the maps, which she had tried to use to rewrite the HOA boundaries under the assumption that if she could control all former estate parcels, she could petition to resurrect an old property covenant, placing her back in control. But the estate wasn't hers. It was James's inheritance. And now it was exposed. Karen was charged with criminal trespass, destruction of property, falsifying municipal documents, and conspiracy to defraud. Walter fled the state, but authorities issued a warrant. Months later, Karen's name was struck from every record. James kept the blueprints. He even opened part of the tunnel for Nohu, proudly called it our secret hallway. Peace had returned, and this time it was here to stay, because not even a master key could open a door that was never meant for Karen.